so much for being here with us today. We are really excited to talk to you, especially with your experience in the virtual assistant industry and in this space. And I'd love to start by you just telling our audience how you got here, why you moved into this space, what your background is in this area.
Fantastic. Well, first I want to put as a funny caveat. It's 2:30 a.m. right now here in the Philippines. I really have that shows how excited for being on your guys'
Yes.
podcast, staying up a little later than usual. So how I got into this space is I actually started working at least in kind of the freelance space way back when I was 15 years old. I'm turning 29 this year, so it's been a while basically that I've kind of taken almost any gig and kind of became a graphic artist at one point, video editing, and has done a little bit of virtual assistant work, although I didn't know that's what it was at that time. And then a few years later, essentially, I was running this publishing company because it was startup. I was working with this American co-founder I met basically all online, and I got to the point where I was like, hey, I really want to start a different business where I can help a lot of other people be able to work remotely. That I have at least, I think I've been doing it like half a decade at that point. So then he had in his back pocket a course on how to hire a virtual assistant. I studied it myself, improved it a lot, re-recorded a lot of it as well, and we started teaching this in a lot of spaces for a lot of people because in my head to be able to get a lot of people hired on working online I need to teach people basically how to hire right the first time. We jokingly called it how not to be a jerk boss 101 online.
I
And that's
like it.
essentially, yeah. And that was essentially about 6 years ago now. And then for current business for 2XU, it became an agency because essentially one of the students that we had on there said, I love what you teach, I don't want to do it. So then, of course, that's naturally how businesses go, and which we almost 5 years later now we've kind of figured things out as we've gone. So yeah.
Oh, that's terrific. I also started this business when I was really young. I was 23, and so I think there's something to be said when you are starting at that stage. I think you're more willing to take risks, and obviously for us, it's worked out terrifically. So I hope the same for you. Um,
Yeah.
so our audience, CEOs, leaders, and oftentimes they struggle with delegating, and I'm sure you see a lot of this in your work. What would you advise our audience to consider when they're looking to outsource? Where do you think is a good first step for them?
So I always say that whenever you're first thinking of like what to delegate, what not to delegate, I always recommend to never delegate sales first. And I see so many people like, oh, I hate hopping on calls with people. I hate doing lead gen. But to be honest, like if the moment that you do, you're gonna hate outsourcing, you're gonna blame everyone else in the world for failing. It's never gonna work out. And it's because most of the time within your business, there's already the default things to kind of delegate are your recurring tasks or what are the things that need to get done daily, weekly, monthly that doesn't have a lot of variables in it. So then for your assistant or whoever you're hiring, they're really supporting you and showing up and doing what you do best. So as a really good example for anyone who's a content creator, for my assistant, for example, when I first hired her, a lot of what her focus was supporting me on my YouTube channel, on TikTok, everywhere else. And then now she's taking over the operations and like client communications as well. But that was a gradual getting to that point. I had her focus first and kind of also at the same time, of course, testing her out on how well she would
Sure.
do on just the recurring, already systematic task before getting to the more complicated, needs a little bit of nuanced tasks later on.
Yeah, that makes sense. And we often advise folks the same to start small, build trust, build the relationship with their VA, and then grow. I think a lot of times I know that we get a lot of clients who they feel like they needed to delegate like last week. And so there's a tendency to
Mhm.
share a lot of projects and tasks that are on board and just say, please, like somebody else work on this. But it's actually not the most efficient way to do it, because if you start small, you're really developing that groove with one another, and it makes things a lot more
Mhm.
efficient
Exactly.
down the way. Um, so are you seeing a lot of growth opportunities right now for entrepreneurs?
Oh, a lot, especially as almost 2 months ago now, I was just in a nomad festival, basically all the way in Bulgaria. I flew there. It was like a
Okay.
15-hour flight. It was fun. It was the first time in Europe. But at the same time, I met so many entrepreneurs who've moved into the remote space or then looking for growth in their business with an assistant. So for them, it's not anymore being kind of locked in the same city as someone. They've kind of started looking
Yeah.
towards like, hey, I can have someone who's in a different time zone than me, but by the time I wake up, everything's been taken care of. I can just start my day. So there's a lot of movement in that space for sure.
I want to go back a minute because I like how you said don't start with sales. I think
Mm.
that
Yeah.
a lot of times that's the easiest thing that people want to outsource. Right? I'll outsource sales and they can bring in leads for me and it will be great. So I want to thank you for pointing that out because I don't think
Mhm.
it's stated a lot. What do you see are the benefits, or what can you tell our audience are the benefits to using a virtual assistant versus hiring someone in person?
The biggest one is one that kind of outlined is you're not anymore stuck to a location. Like if you hire someone local to your city or even to your just your country, you're also thinking of like their health benefits, making sure that they're taken care of as a person. You're also a little bit limited with where you can grow further with them versus like I mentioned, for a lot of our clients who are in the UK time zone for us, basically, or in the US time zone, there's that magical moment where there might be a 4 hour overlap between our executive assistants and our clients. But for a lot of the time, the EA has a little bit of flexibility themselves, just like for the client, they have flexibility as well. So it's kind of this shared ongoing goal of like not being stuck to one thing, and it not just the location independence but also the time independence as well, as I think something that a lot of people don't see just yet, and hence why of course usually the default is hiring someone locally, but hiring someone remotely also gives the other person on the other end freedom too.
We preach flexibility daily, right? And
Mhm.
it also it just improves that work life balance, right? To be
Oh
able
yeah.
to work when you want to work and have someone on the other end who does the same, and it aligns. Talking remotely, what platforms do you advise VAs and clients to use in order to have this seamless operation in this remote world?
So there's still up to this day, I would love to say like, oh, just use this one tool. It
Oh, of
really
course.
depends on tool. The use basically of a tool. Like for example, for us at 2XU, and we've kind of influenced a lot of our other clients in doing the same. We use Notion for everything. We have it for like things like our starting up procedures, our assets, like databases on the training basically that our EAs go through as well as on there. But I know a lot of clients who live on Asana or they live on Trello, and to be honest, the main thing that you need when it comes to choosing a tool is that it works. Like it doesn't have to be the most expensive or the cheapest one as well. Is that both ends you guys are actually using it rather than, oh yeah, we're using Trello, but your assistant is still writing down everything in a notepad. That's not going to be something that you can keep growing into. So it's just all about the use and making sure that both sides are using it.
Yeah. Nicole loves platforms and efficiency and productivity.
Mm.
This is like her jam. So I know she loves those kinds of questions. And, she's our COO, and that is like her
Mhm.
domain. And so, and a lot of what has been coming up lately for, with our platforms and softwares and clients are asking us about is AI. And
Mhm.
so Nicole's been talking a lot about it. We've been working together on some things about it. And I know Nicole sees a lot of it in her day-to-day work. Um, how do you think that a business owner or client can integrate AI with using a virtual assistant?
So it's a pretty good question, and one that I remember when ChatGPT came out, I had the first thought of like, oh no, what does this mean? And then like, no, wait, this is a great opportunity, because that also means that a natural cycle that of course that for entrepreneurs, you start a business, you start getting overwhelmed, and things start falling through the cracks. The route is then when you start a business, you have an assistant basically follow through and making sure that you actually implement or actually follow up on the things that you wanted to be able to do. But the natural thing that also happens is then the assistant gets overwhelmed. The assistant is the one who's trying to chase a bajillion million things, trying to make sure things are working right. So then this is kind of where AI comes in, because your assistant becomes enabled with AI. They become kind of that support for the assistant without having to hire another team, basically. So as a really good example for my own assistant, within the last year, she's learned how to create automations for herself to make it easy for her to send emails to clients and make it very, very custom based on what parameters we set. It's also made it easier for her. And I was talking about this to a client where if you looked at my LinkedIn, 1 in 10 posts are written by me, but you can't tell unless you like really have watched how I write on LinkedIn. That was because we were able to teach an AI on how I would usually write based off content that I've written for the last 5 years. And basically it has learned how to do it. So my assistant just puts in the prompt and it sounds exactly like me. So that's kind of how I see AI coming in, is there are AI assistants then supporting your executive assistants.
Yes.
We couldn't agree more. And I'm glad that you talked about prompts. And I'm not sure, everyone knows about AI, but prompts are kind of a little on the back end that you have to teach it. And so thank you for bringing that to the audience's attention. Where do you see the virtual assistant industry going over the next 5 years?
So I can see both ends. So one is on the entrepreneurship, we'll never really kind of not really need virtual assistants. And it's you see in every fictional and real examples of entrepreneurs who've really grown and gotten to where they are because of their assistants, whether that's someone who's remote or someone in person. That's happened over and over again, and I don't think that's going to go away. On the virtual assistant side, though, in reality, and I know there's a lot of like fear of getting replaced by AI. There's a lot of fear of AI just taking over everything else. But in reality, you'll only be quote unquote beat by someone who has learned AI faster or better than you have. So on the evolution of where things are at, AI empowered executive or virtual assistants are going to be the norm, just because not only is it making the client's life easier, it's making the assistant's lives easier, where it doesn't have to be human error anymore. It doesn't have to be that someone from the Philippines gets hired and they're limited by their English, because AI helps and fixes that and empowers them basically to speak up. So I see that as kind of the next evolution, is not on the entrepreneurship and assistant relationship side, but the relationship that assistants or freelancers in general will have with AI.
Yeah, I think that, a lot of what we say is it can only make your virtual assistant more efficient, more effective. I would say to virtual assistants that are, nervous about it, that they can learn how they can actually help more people and work with more clients because of the time that they save. So I think that it's a tremendous opportunity there for sure.
Oh yeah. It's one thing I always say though when it comes to AI is it is a multiplier. Like same thing as any other tool out there. If you have like the most updated Photoshop, but you can't really learn how, or you haven't learned how to use it, it's going to be to you a little bit useless and a little bit expensive. Versus the same thing with AI. If you're just like Nicole was saying, if you don't know how to prompt it right, if you don't know how to set it up right, it's just another $20 every single month that you're paying for. Versus if you did put in the time to learn it, because it's only going to get better from here, but only if we are also willing to adapt for it to get better.
So I know that you have been a CEO for quite a while. What have you learned that you think is one of the most important pieces of advice for someone to hear?
It's always that everything comes down to people. Like I am someone who is a systems nerd. I'm a marketing nerd. Everything with data and things that I can A plus B is equals C. I love diving into, but nothing works if the people doesn't work. If you're not hiring the right people, if you're not working with the right people, so it's not just the people that you hire, it's also the clients that you pick and choose you work with. Like we've had it before where we had a really amazing executive assistant, but we weren't able to filter the client right, and they just didn't work out. And same thing the other way around, of amazing client, but it didn't work out, the assistant. So when it comes to growing and having a business, you really have to be intentional about the people that you welcome into your business, because they're going to make or break it whether you like it or not, especially as things start breaking, things start scaling. We had it where we had 10 clients in a week and we were like, okay, how do we like fulfill and make sure that these clients are happy? And it was possible because I had a really good team. So I remember also a time where I didn't have anyone and I was trying to fulfill everything myself. So it is a balance, but I think that's the biggest one, is be intentional about the people that you surround yourself with in your business.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I like that. We haven't heard that piece. We've now done just about 80 episodes, and I agree. You have to build a strong team. Otherwise,
Mhm.
you're going to falter. And even though I think a lot of times in this remote space, clients may forget or staff may forget that it is still a people to people, right? You're still
Mhm.
talking with someone on the other end, and you have to make that connection, and you have to um, just align. So
Exactly.
I really loved your piece of advice. Um, Danielle, do you want to ask Le-an our last question that we ask
Yes.
all of our guests?
This is our last question, but it's also Nicole and my favorite question. So the title of our podcast is Not Your Average CEO, and we would love to hear what that means to you. What does being not your average CEO mean, and how others can learn from that?
For me, and I thought about this piece when I first saw your podcast, I'm like, that's such an interesting concept of not your average CEO. Because I think to become a not average CEO, you have to add your individuality into it. Like you have to add a little bit of you in the things that you're doing. So then you're not like everyone else, because of course we're not like everyone else. Everyone else has a backstory. Like I have things in my past. So whenever I bring it up to people, then it kind of relates and can make everything else make sense. Versus like if I was talking to just Nicole or just you, Danielle, like you guys have things in your past and things you've done, and also the things that are the places that you want to be in 5-10 years from now, that's going to be different from everyone else. So if you want to be someone who's not average, be yourself, because that's kind of the most not average thing you can ever do.
Very wonderful. Can you, Le-an, tell our audience where they can find more about you? Can you tell them a little bit about your podcast? And we will include everything in our collaborative show notes.
Fantastic. So, I, meaning my assistant, is most active on LinkedIn. So anytime someone messages on there, comments on there, it'll probably reach me. Of course, I have my YouTube channel where I host as well of my own podcast called the Scale You Podcast for by 2XU, and as well as Instagram. So those are the three spaces: LinkedIn, YouTube, and Instagram.
Thank you so much, Le-an. It was wonderful talking to you about the virtual assistant space. And thank you for joining us on this collaborative journey and allowing business owners to hear more and different perspectives on what the virtual industry can do for them. And it's been a true pleasure. Thank you for joining us so late at your time and
Yes,
making
middle of the night.
accommodations
Thank
to
you.
talk to us. Thank you so much. We will include everything in the show notes.
Amazing. This was fun. This is definitely worth staying up.
Thank you.